The Appalachians aren't hills, they're prisons. For 480 million years, they've held things that defy biology, physics, sanity. Tribal elders whisper of the Okwelanu, the eaters between worlds. Federal databases list 2,117 missing persons here since 1973. Only 38 bodies ever found. The rest? They're still screaming where the GPS dies. This isn't folklore, it's a war. Dr. Lena Armitage was no stranger to isolation. As a field biologist specializing in extremophilic fungi, she often ventured into regions where maps turned to guesswork and compasses spun without reason. But Blackwater Hollow was different. Locals didn't just avoid it, they refused to speak of it. Even the rangers used phrases like off-limits and wrong place with an uneasiness that felt ancient, inherited. Lena had come for Radix tenebris, a rare bioluminescent fungus that emitted a deep blue glow described in only a handful of obscure 19th century texts. According to those who dared study it, the fungus grew in places untouched by sunlight or salvation, and it was said to glow brightest near decaying organic matter. Lena had located it once, briefly, during an expedition in northern Ontario. The sample died within days. This time, she wanted to observe it in situ. She entered Blackwater Hollow on a cloudy morning, armed with a notebook, Geiger counter, analog camera, and a custom-built field recorder. The sun barely filtered through the twisted canopy, branches clawing at each other like skeletal hands. The deeper she went, the more the air thickened, not just with humidity, but with something else, pressure. A low, oppressive presence that crawled across the skin like the shadow of an insect. Her last transmission to the lab was not distress. It wasn't even human. Technicians manning the radio at 04:17 a.m. reported hearing what sounded like a children's choir, singing in reverse. The voices echoed in cascading, discordant waves, rising and falling like a tide of forgotten lullabies. Then, silence. Search teams were dispatched 3 days later. They found no footprints, no camp, and no Lena. But nailed to a bloodwood tree, one of the gnarled, rust-colored giants that populated the hollow, they found her analog camera, still intact, still loaded. The final image developed showed a creature. It stood just behind a patch of luminescent fungus, crouched like a predator, but built like a man. Its limbs were jointed wrong, doubled in places they shouldn't be, bending like the legs of a spider. The skin hung in wet, fungal sheets, as if it were sloughing off something else beneath. Where a face should have been, there was a vertical mouth, no lips, no teeth, running from chin to sternum, stretched wide around a partially digested deer carcass. Inside the black ichor that spilled from its center, one object floated, barely legible, Lena's field notes. Forward Operations Report 9081. Subject's boots were found near the hollow's northern basin. Soil samples from soles contained isotopes with a half-life of 3.2 seconds. The radiation signature did not match any known element. Skin-like fungal matter retrieved from nearby foliage displays non-terrestrial amino patterns and rhythmic pulsation under thermal imaging. 2 weeks after Lena's disappearance, Cherokee elder Thomas Raincrow agreed to speak. He didn't want to be recorded, nor did he wish to enter the hollow again, but what he said was carefully transcribed. That place was a scar even before we had words for scars, a sinkhole in the world. The old ones believed something fell there a long time ago, something that never should have touched this earth. We call it the black wound. The fungus, it's not feeding, it's healing. That hollow is a wound, and the crawler stitches it shut with whatever flesh it finds. By the time a full research team was approved to investigate, the hollow had changed. Radiation spikes made it nearly impossible to stay longer than a few hours without protective gear. Trees had moved, rearranged themselves. That's what the team thought at first, until a geospatial survey confirmed it. Entire root systems had relocated. Paths opened one day were swallowed the next. They never found Lena's body, but over the years, bits and pieces of her kept turning up. 1994, Blackwater Incident B. A pair of amateur cryptid hunters from Tennessee entered the hollow with a VHS camcorder. Only one came out. He was barefoot, naked except for the headset of Lena's old field recorder jammed around his throat. It had fused with his skin. When questioned, he repeated only one phrase. "She sings to the soil now. She sings where the bones sleep." He died of organ failure 6 hours later. The autopsy revealed a thick spore mat inside his lungs, identical in structure to Radix tenebrus, but with human DNA markers spliced through its genome. Specifically, markers matching Dr. Armitage. 1998, witness report, Ranger Taylor. On patrol along the southern rim of Blackwater Hollow, Ranger June Taylor witnessed something crawling out of the fog. At first, she thought it was a large animal dragging a broken leg, but as it moved closer, she realized its torso was too long, its arms scraping the forest floor. And it was humming, something soft, almost childish, as if trying to remember a tune from long ago. When the creature rose to its full height, nearly 8 feet, she saw the slit down its middle slowly open, not with force, but like a curtain parting. Inside was a tangle of flesh, bones, and black liquid. Floating near the top, a strip of faded film negatives. One of them, processed later, showed Lena standing near a glowing cluster of fungus, smiling, unaware of what was just behind her. By the early 2000s, Blackwater Hollow had been sealed off entirely by the state under the guise of ecological preservation. Satellite images were scrubbed, maps redacted, and roads rerouted. Only a small team at the Department of Biological Anomalies retained access. Among them was Dr. Marla Keene, Lena's former mentee. In her private notes, never released to the public, Marla described her final visit to the hollow in 2005. "The deeper I went, the more time began to bend. It felt like walking through a dream stitched together from a dozen lives. I heard singing, Lena's voice, layered with a dozen children. They weren't behind me, they were below me, in the roots, in the stone. When I reached the hollow's center, I saw it, the crawler, watching, waiting, as if it knew me, as if it remembered the scent of Lena on my skin. And then it began to molt. The fungus peeled away from its chest. A cavity opened. Inside floated something new, a journal, my own from years ago, pages I burned in 1999. But there they were, dry, unreadable, intact. Skeletal remains found, 2011. During a rare dry season, a sinkhole opened near the southern perimeter of the hollow. A cleanly severed spinal column was recovered. Vertebrae twisted into a spiral, fused with what appeared to be hardened mycelium. Forensic testing revealed tooth marks on the bones, but no animal in the fossil record matched the pattern. Embedded within the hardened growth was a locket. Inside, a photograph of Dr. Lena Armitage, age 10. The story became legend, a cautionary tale. But those who worked the Blackwater case long enough began to notice a pattern. The hollow wasn't expanding, but it wasn't dying either. It fed selectively, occasionally, as if according to a cycle. Some speculated it wasn't a place at all, but a membrane, a transitional space between what lives and what waits. What stitched the hollow shut wasn't just a creature, it was a mechanism, an organism shaped by grief, memory, and decay. It recycled what entered, repurposed it, not to destroy, but to preserve something it couldn't let go of. 2020, Private Field Log, Marla Keene, deceased. I've come to believe Lena never truly died, at least not in the way we understand it. The hollow didn't consume her, it adopted her. She became part of the song, part of the stitching. She saw the wound and offered herself to close it. I hear her now, at night, when the wind cuts through the trees and the shadows stretch longer than they should. She's still in there, not buried, not lost. She's singing.
Cherokee Oral History, Thomas Raincrow. Excerpt. The crawler doesn't hunt, it collects. Old gods bled into this world through cracks we were never meant to open. The hollow was where the blood pooled, and it's not finished yet. Every so often, someone wanders in, someone with sorrow in their bones, someone whose heart hums the same broken tune. It hears them, and it offers them a place in the stitching. Blackwater Hollow remains unmarked on official records. But if you drive far enough down County Road 6, past the last gas station, past where the asphalt turns to gravel and the sky seems to forget the sun, you'll find a fence, barbed, rusted, with a sign that reads, "No trespassing, biohazard containment zone, authorized personnel only. Contact with fungal matter is fatal." And if you stand there long enough, ignoring the cold, ignoring the silence, you might hear something faint, beneath the wind, beneath your heartbeat. A harmony, off-key, backward. A children's choir, singing from beneath the soil. And if you listen too long, it might start singing just for you. Beneath Bryson City's abandoned Number 9 mine, they still scratch on the walls. No one knew exactly when the mine first turned, only that it changed. The record said the Number 9 mine closed in 1977 after an explosion in Tunnel Gamma killed 7 workers. But locals whispered it had been dying long before that. By the early 70s, the miners talked about strange drafts, cold one moment, hot the next, whispers echoing through stone, shapes darting behind carts and corners. Then came the tapping. In October of 1987, seismic monitors set up by Appalachian Coal Authority to detect fault shifts began to pick up something else entirely: rhythmic tapping, not random like a cave-in or pressure release. This was deliberate, spaced out, structured. The first deciphered message sent a chill through the lab. "Let us out." The technicians thought it was a prank, but it kept happening. Every few weeks the signal would return. Cold, hungry, dark. Always the same point of origin, Tunnel Gamma. Attempts to investigate were quickly abandoned. Miners refused to step into Gamma after 1982. Said the walls cried when you got too deep. Said you could hear children laughing in the blackness, giggling that turned to screaming if you didn't bring a flashlight. A few claimed they had seen them. Not ghosts, exactly, but things shaped like children, crawling in the dark,
their eyes glowing like dying embers, covered in soot, their mouths rimmed in black. One veteran miner, Lewis Granger, went down in '83 with a handheld camcorder. He never made it to the main shaft. Halfway through the descent, his light flickered out. When the elevator came back up, it was empty. The camera was found months later wedged behind a support beam in Gamma. The footage was smeared with static and ash. But for a few seconds, just before the tape cut, something crept into frame. A child-sized figure, emaciated, fingers long and warped like melted wax, dragging itself across the rock wall. Its eyes were like burned-out bulbs. The mine was sealed that winter. Years passed. Stories became legend. Then came 2003. A new surveillance system was installed by the Appalachian Coal Authority, not to reopen the mine, but to monitor seismic activity due to increasing tremors near Bryson. One night, just past 2 a.m., a motion alert triggered. Security reviewed the footage, expecting a raccoon or faulty sensor. What they saw, instead, was something impossible. The camera at Tunnel Gamma's secondary vent, a rusted grate 10 feet off the floor, shook. The steel warped as if something immense pressed from the other side. Then it gave way with a shriek of torn metal. Out poured a figure, then another. Crawling, twisted children, skeletal, slick with coal grit. One paused and looked up at the camera, its eyes, hollow yet glowing faintly, locked onto the lens. Then it reached up. The screen distorted, the lens cracked from the heat. Later inspection showed melted plastic. A single handprint remained scorched into the glass. Forensics said the fingerprint ridges weren't human. The heat required to make that kind of mark should have ignited flesh, and yet there were no burns on the vent, just the camera. In 2011, pressured by growing public interest and conspiracy chatter online, the authority agreed to drill a single vertical borehole into Tunnel Gamma for a core sample. A rescue team stood by in case of collapse. They never expected what came out. The core was brought up sealed in titanium. It took hours to extract due to the density of the rock. But embedded within the core, deep in the compressed shale, were teeth. Small, round, white. Baby teeth. Dozens of them. One had a filling less than 2 years old. The DNA analysis shocked everyone. 14 of the teeth matched missing children reported between 1932 and 1976, all within a 10-mile radius of the mine. The disappearances were unconnected until now. But the 14th tooth, that one belonged to Kayla Mitchell, age 8. She had vanished only 3 days before the drill hit bone. She was walking home from school. The police thought she was abducted. There was no trace. The borehole had cut through a hollow chamber, a place untouched for decades. Inside, ground-penetrating radar showed tunnels not on any map. The cavity pulsed with residual heat. Instruments overloaded within minutes of insertion. Then the tapping returned. This time, it was louder. "Let us out. It's hungry. We can't hold it much longer." The Appalachian Coal Authority classified all findings and issued a memo to all field operatives. Cease all subsurface operations. Entity is territorial, feeds on fear vibrations. Bryson City locals didn't need memos. They already knew to stay away. The woods around the mine grew wild, fast, as if nature wanted it covered. Paths would vanish overnight. Lights wouldn't work near the entrance. Phones died. Animals refused to go near it. Even birds flew wide circles. Evelyn Rawls, a retired nurse, lived less than a mile from the mine. She remembered Kayla, had seen her 3 nights before the girl vanished. Said the child was standing at the edge of the woods just staring into the trees. When Evelyn called out, Kayla didn't move, just tilted her head. She wasn't alone. I saw two smaller shapes behind her. They were crouched low, like they were waiting for her to say yes. No one drilled again, but the mine didn't sleep. Between 2014 and 2018, campers reported distant tapping at night, rhythmic, like a metal pick on stone. Others claimed to hear children singing, soft, off-key lullabies, sometimes mixed with weeping. A few hikers went missing. All were later found with severe dehydration, even after just a day. Their skin dusted with coal, their hands and mouths black. One man, Philip Ross, was found curled in a culvert less than a mile from Tunnel Gamma. He'd torn off all his fingernails. Written across his chest were the words, "She wants us to sing." He never spoke again. A journalist named Henry Mallory tried to expose the story in 2019. He'd gained access to leaked footage and the 2011 memo. His article, titled "The Coal Dust Children," was set to go live on a fringe investigative site. It never did. Henry disappeared before publishing. His apartment was found undisturbed, but his laptop was gone. What remained was his phone, inside his bathtub, still recording. The last 5 seconds of audio, soft tapping. Then a child's voice, raspy and cold. "Let us out." A man screamed. Then silence. Mallory's DNA was later matched to flesh found in an air vent on the surface level of Tunnel Gamma. Theories abound. Some believe a gas leak caused hallucinations, and the children's presence is just urban legend. Others point to a geological anomaly beneath the mountain, magnetic distortions perhaps, a radioactive vein warping space and perception. A few speak of older, darker things. Cherokee elders say that the mountain swallowed children long before miners came, that in the deep, cold places something waits, a mother made of stone and fire and shadow. It lures the lost, feeds on fear. It doesn't kill them, not all the way. It uses them, hollowed out like puppets, coal-dusted vessels crawling in the dark. And sometimes, when it's hungry, it lets them come to the surface. In 2022, a private group of paranormal investigators hiked to the sealed mine entrance. They carried thermal cameras, LiDAR drones, and prayer beads. They never made it inside. One of their live feeds, briefly broadcast before the signal was lost, showed 5 shadowy figures standing at the tree line. Small, unmoving. As the group approached, one figure stepped forward. Its voice, high and metallic, pierced the silence. "We missed the light. Won't you bring it back?" Then the screen went black. The team was later found days later, all asleep in a perfect circle around the borehole site. Eyes open, unblinking. Pulse present, but faint. It took months for them to speak again. When they did, all they said, every one of them, was the same thing. "She's still hungry." To this day, the Appalachian Coal Authority denies the existence of any anomaly in Tunnel Gamma. The mine is still sealed, overgrown by trees, but those who walk too close sometimes hear it.
Deep in the Unicoi Mountains of North Carolina, where old-growth forests hide secrets older than the Cherokee, there's a cave that breathes. Locals call it the Throat. Every 73 hours, like clockwork, the mountain exhales a blast of air so cold it flash freezes anything within 2 feet of the entrance. Wildlife avoids it. Trees near the mouth are scorched black by frostbite, their trunks ringed with concentric frost lines, like the ghost of a scream frozen in time. No one knows who first named it, but old maps simply label the area with a warning, Avert thine eyes. The cave's mouth is a vertical gash about 10 feet wide, jagged and uneven, hidden in a high-altitude clearing where the moth dies and compasses spin. It doesn't appear on satellite images, just a blur, like something tried to edit it out. In April of 2015, a seasoned climber named Javier Ruiz set out to find the source of the strange exhalation. A documentary filmmaker and extreme spelunker, Ruiz had tackled underwater cave systems in Brazil, lava tubes in Iceland, and the ice shafts of Antarctica. But none of that prepared him for what lay beneath the Unicoi. Armed with climbing gear, thermal clothing, and a GoPro strapped to his helmet, Ruiz set off alone. He left a note with GPS coordinates for his girlfriend, promising to return in 48 hours. He never did. What follows is reconstructed from his recovered footage and the subsequent investigation. Javier's breath fogged the lens as he stood at the cave's edge. His voice was calm but excited. "The temperature just dropped 20 degrees. I'm at the threshold," he said. "The cave is breathing." He held up a handheld anemometer. The gust from within measured at -196 degrees centigrade. "That's below liquid nitrogen levels," he muttered, stunned. "No wind chill. It's not air rushing through, it's air being exhaled." He wasn't being poetic. The stalactites lining the ceiling vibrated in sync, humming a deep, low frequency. Not wind, not echoes, something deeper, like a groan from a slumbering colossus. Ruiz clicked on his helmet light, rigged his descent ropes, and lowered himself into the cave. The walls narrowed into a pulsating shaft, not visually, viscerally. The air vibrated. The deeper he went, the more it felt like moving through a throat, the stone smooth and undulating with mineral-rich veins that pulsed faintly in the light. The video caught something astonishing. Stalactites and stalagmites arranged in symmetrical, repeating patterns. Too precise, too organic. One cluster resembled molars, another a spine. At 350 feet, Ruiz panned his light across a row of stone formations. At first glance, just rock formations. But then they shifted ever so slightly, revealing textures unlike stone, not polished by erosion, fossilized. Ribs, some cracked, some intact, curved upward like cathedral arches. One even had what appeared to be cartilage webbing between it and the next. Ruiz stopped speaking, just breathing. Then the bass note. The video visibly shook. Dust fell from the walls. The camera auto-focused wildly. It wasn't a landslide, it was sound. A single, impossibly deep tone, lower than any organ pipe could produce, strong enough to be felt in the bones. The cave was speaking, or singing, or sobbing. Ruiz stumbled upon what he first thought was an underground lake, but the surface tension didn't ripple like water. It swelled, breathed. The video caught glints of movement in the dark. Not fish, more like translucent tendrils wriggling just beneath the surface. One rose and pressed against a stone ledge, revealing suckers the size of dinner plates and barbs that glittered like glass. Ruiz backed away. "Not water," he whispered. "It's mucus or blood." Something warm and wet splattered the camera lens. The last frame before static, Ruiz looking up, eyes wide in terror. The glow from his helmet light caught a slick, fibrous membrane descending towards him. Not rock, not cave wall, a tongue. 48 hours later, search and rescue found Ruiz's body 20 miles away in a creek,
barefoot and wearing only his thermals, as if he'd been stripped and regurgitated. There were no external injuries, no signs of trauma, but his lungs were grossly distended. Autopsy revealed they were filled with 37 gallons of liquid that matched the cave's atmospheric chemical composition. High concentrations of geosmin, the compound responsible for the earthy smell of rain, were detected. His stomach was empty. No food, no bile, just sediment and microscopic spores unknown to science. The kicker? His climbing rope was intact, still anchored 800 feet above the shaft, as if he'd simply vanished. The investigation. Dr. Eleanor Vance, a geologist from Georgia Tech with a specialization in tectonic cavities, took over the research. She had spent her career debunking living cave myths, but Ruiz's footage changed everything. This wasn't just geothermal activity. This wasn't erosion or volcanic gas release. The structural formations inside that shaft were symmetrical and followed anatomical alignments: spines, teeth, ribs, veins. Her hypothesis sent shockwaves through the academic world. The mountain, she said in a viral press conference, isn't hollow, it's a carcass, and we're living inside something that died hungry. Satellite readings confirmed anomalous magnetic fields around the throat, with consistent rhythmic pulses every 73 hours, matching human respiratory patterns if scaled up several million times. Seismographs picked up internal shifts, not like tectonic tremors, but like muscle contractions. The pulses weren't tectonic, they were peristaltic. Inside the cave, spores collected from Ruiz's clothing were found to contain structures resembling cilia, like the lining of a trachea. A single sample under electron microscope showed cellular patterns never seen in geology or biology. Alien, but ancient. Not silicon, not carbon, something in between. The cave is not a passage, Dr. Vance concluded. It's a memory, a corpse with reflexes. As the story spread, thrill seekers, YouTubers, and death cults began arriving at the throat. Most stayed above ground, some weren't so lucky. In October 2016, a group of amateur explorers rappelled into the shaft. Their live stream ended abruptly, with viewers claiming to hear whispering in reverse audio and a low, wet moan. Authorities found their gear a week later, soaked in something that smelled like ozone and old breath. No bodies. The rope had been bitten through. Dr. Vance's final note, December 2017. In her last recorded message before she vanished attempting a solo descent, she left behind a chilling theory. What we call mountains may not all be geological. Some may be biological, fossils on a scale we can't comprehend. What if the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs didn't just hit Earth? What if it pierced something, and we built our world atop its corpse? She theorized that the Unicoi Formation was part of a long-dead Leviathan, something older than time, not just buried, preserved, frozen in mid-death, deep enough that Earth grew over it like scar tissue. And now it's dreaming and breathing. The most recent incident, 2023. A drone sent into the cave with infrared mapping equipment recorded new data. The inner walls had shifted. Landmarks seen in Ruiz's footage were no longer in the same place. The shaft had contracted by 18 feet. The ribs had grown a film of soft tissue. Not fossil, regeneration. Even more disturbing, audio captured during the exhalation cycle contained a pattern. Subharmonic frequencies that when slowed down resembled a voice. Translated from Morse code, it said, "Awake, hungry, listening."
The U.S. government quietly fenced off the area in early 2024, citing thermal instability. But hikers still report hearing sounds in the wind, not voices, not screams, breathing. Every 73 hours, the cave doesn't breathe in, only out. And someday, it may try to speak again, or worse, swallow. In Fannin County, Georgia, nestled deep within the Blue Ridge Wilderness, there stood a single, lightning-scarred oak. Its bark was blackened, its trunk twisted unnaturally, as if something within it writhed against the wood, trying to break free. The locals called it the Hungry Oak. Between 1923 and 2018, exactly 217 people vanished in its shadow. Hikers, campers, hunters. They entered the woods, often leaving prayer ribbons tied to the gnarled branches as offerings, and never returned to retrieve them. Most locals had long learned to avoid the grove on the north slope of Blood Mountain. Even experienced hikers stepped around it in silence, boots crunching uneasily over leaves that never seemed to decay. No birds ever nested in the branches. No squirrels dared climb it. The forest grew thick around it, but that tree stood alone in a widening circle of death, where nothing else dared grow. In 2019, driven by a strange compulsion and professional curiosity, botanist Dr. Aris Thorne led an expedition to study the oak. He wasn't a believer in folklore or ghosts. He'd heard the stories, the disappearances, the cursed ribbons, the unsettling dreams hikers described after brushing against its bark. But Thorne needed proof. He was obsessed with ancient flora and rumored anomalies. This tree was both. On October 12th, Thorne and 2 grad students reached the tree just after dawn. The air was oddly cold, despite the Georgia sun filtering through red and gold autumn leaves. The closer they got, the more metallic the air smelled, like rust and stagnant water. Dr. Thorne wore thick gloves as he unpacked his increment borer and carefully approached the trunk. It was rough to the touch, its bark cracked like an old burn scar. He placed the bore into the wood and turned it slowly, eyes narrowing as resistance changed. The tree shuddered. He stepped back. "Did you feel that?" asked Mason, one of the students. "It's just wind," Thorne lied. There was no breeze. He pulled out the core sample. Instead of the usual dry pulp and resin, thick black sap oozed from the hollow. It dripped down like tar, coating the tool, releasing a stench so foul Mason gagged behind his mask. "It smells like something dead," said Alina, the second student, covering her nose. Thorne nodded, disturbed. "It's not just sap." Back at the lab, what they found in the sample defied explanation. Microscopic analysis showed cells consistent with human hemoglobin. Further testing revealed remnants of neural tissue, tangled like brain matter embedded in the grain. The rings were even more unsettling. Some rings had abnormal widening, as if fed by something richer than water and sunlight. One ring dated back to 12,000 BCE, and within its hardened fibers was traced DNA, Homo erectus. The discovery should have made Thorne famous, but before he could publish, something changed. He stopped responding to calls. Alina, who had been logging data from the samples, was found dead in her apartment 2 weeks later. Her fingernails were packed with soil, and her skin was streaked with black sap. Authorities ruled it a suicide, but the look frozen on her face, lips pulled back, eyes wide in terror, told another story. Mason went missing days later. His last known location was a parking lot near the Blood Mountain trailhead. And Dr. Thorne? He vanished entirely. No credit card activity, no car found. Just his muddy boots left at the tree's base beside a freshly tied red ribbon. By 2021, Blood Mountain had developed a reputation so severe the Park Service unofficially rerouted trails away from the oak. Unofficially, because even acknowledging the oak's presence seemed to invite it. Park Ranger Elena Vasquez was among the few brave or reckless enough to patrol the area. A former combat medic with a love of silence, she volunteered for solo rotations on the Blood Mountain Ridge. She kept a journal, mostly sketches and wildlife sightings. But on October 7th, 2021, she wrote something else. Tonight, the oak bloomed. Ribbons turned into fingers, pale and twitching. They pointed west, toward fresh graves. Elena had gone to the grove just before sunset to investigate complaints of screaming wind. Her boots sank slightly into soft, dark earth. Crows circled but wouldn't land. She saw the ribbons, dozens of them fluttering in the breeze. Only there was no breeze. One of the ribbons was twitching. As she approached, her breath caught. The silk had changed, its ends no longer frayed but jointed. Fingertips, fingernails. The red ribbon writhed as if alive. One by one, the rest followed. Dozens of fingers now dangled from the branches, all pointing in the same direction, west, into the woods. Elena backed away slowly, radio crackling on her shoulder. A voice came through, static, then a whisper. Elena. She turned, no one behind her. The tree was silent. She bolted back to her station and locked the door. That night, she drank herself to sleep and dreamed of roots slithering under her skin. The next morning, she followed where the fingers had pointed. Roughly a mile west, she found the ground unnaturally soft. The underbrush had been torn, as if something had crawled its way through on its belly. Crows were circling again. Elena knelt and brushed away a layer of dead leaves. Beneath was soil, freshly overturned. No markers, no smell, but as she dug with her gloves, her fingers struck something soft and yielding. A plastic poncho, a boot, then skin. She staggered back, calling in state police. The excavation revealed 5 bodies in various stages of decomposition. 2 were identified as missing hikers. 1 matched Mason's dental records. 1 was Dr. Thorne. The 5th wasn't identifiable by modern means. The bones were too old, yet the skin was fresh, as if it had only died hours ago. A forensic specialist fainted upon realizing the DNA was a 12,000-year-old hominid, somehow still soft to the touch. A media frenzy followed. Blood Mountain was closed off entirely. The tree was fenced with barbed wire. Journalists swarmed, but none of them lasted long. Anyone who camped near the grove suffered bizarre symptoms: nosebleeds, hallucinations, night terrors. One photographer was found half buried near the oak's roots, his eyes missing, mouth packed with dirt. A team from the CDC arrived to test the area for potential biological anomalies. Their official report cited ancient fungal toxins and psychological susceptibility. But one member of the team, Dr. Valerie Kim, leaked a portion of the findings anonymously. Her leaked file described biological intelligence. The tree wasn't diseased, it was sentient. It was absorbing its victims into its own tissue, digesting them. Over millennia, it had learned. It could mimic human pheromones. It could attract prey. One chilling line stood out in the report. It is no longer a tree. It is a predator. Elena disappeared a week later. The last page of her journal was found near the tree, wrapped around the hilt of a ranger knife embedded in the trunk. The ink was smeared, but the words were readable. I dream of roots wrapping around my heart. I dream of mouths opening in the bark. They whisper to me now, not in words, in hunger. I think it's growing. I think it's ready to walk. Since then, no one has approached the tree. But a drone survey in early 2022 showed something terrifying. The oak had moved by 27 inches. Trees don't walk, but this one drags. Beneath its bark are hints of muscle fiber. Beneath the roots, tunnels deeper than the mountain itself. The number of missing persons is now untraceable. Dozens of records wiped from systems. Locals speak of the forest that eats and leave their dead outside town limits. No one ties ribbons anymore.
The wind in the Blood Mountain woods sometimes sounds like whispering voices. If you listen closely, you can hear your name. Do not go looking for the hungry oak. It will find you when it's ready. Near Elkins, West Virginia, there lies an empty valley the locals avoid even in daylight. A single rusted church bell sways gently from a weathered frame, surrounded by the skeleton of a once standing chapel, devoured long ago by moss and time. Nothing lives in that hollow, not even birds, but the wind always passes through it, cold, deliberate, and far too intelligent. They call it Death's Doorbell. It rings precisely 13 times before someone dies nearby. No rope, no visible mechanism, no hand ever touches it, and yet it tolls. In the winter of 1987, a group of audio engineers from Morgantown University, intrigued by the legend, made the hike into the valley with portable recording equipment. They were skeptics mostly, curious about the stories, but convinced they'd find a rational explanation, a warped wind tunnel perhaps, or seismic vibrations. They set up microphones and seismic meters around the bell and waited. The bell didn't ring for hours. Then, just as dusk swallowed the last gold of the sun, it tolled. Once, twice, 13 times. The recording was unlike anything the engineers had ever captured. It was deeper than any bell had a right to be, inhumanly resonant. When they ran a spectral analysis, what they found shattered their confidence. Each toll contained overlapping frequencies, chaotic and layered like whispered echoes bouncing in a cathedral. Embedded within the resonance were what sounded like human screams, distinct, agonized cries masked beneath the harmonic decay. One engineer, Thomas Newell, analyzed the waveforms further. He isolated the seventh toll and boosted the buried sound. A scream, female, wavering on the edge of a sob and a shriek. The 12th toll, a man's voice, rasping, coughing through blood, screaming for his mother. And the 13th toll, louder than the rest, contained something unplaceable, deeper than sound, a frequency that seemed to press into the skull like a vice. When boosted, it revealed a name buried beneath the wail: Sarah Jennings. She had vanished in 1952, last seen walking home from her shift at the Elkins textile mill. No body was ever found, no trace, just a trail of broken branches and her shoes left neatly on a gravel path, pointing toward the valley. Her scream, buried in the last toll, peaked at exactly 18.5 hertz, the same frequency known to induce paralyzing dread in the human brain. The engineers never returned. One of them, Thomas Newell, went missing 3 days later. His girlfriend told police he woke up screaming about bells that night, said his ears were bleeding, said he heard her voice in his dreams, Sarah's voice, begging to be let out of the bell. He left the apartment just before dawn and never came back. His car was found parked along a dirt road near the valley. The keys were in the ignition, the windshield cracked from the inside. The bell rang 13 times the next morning. In 2003, paranormal investigator Marcus Reed arrived in Elkins with a van full of gear and a stubborn, camera-ready smirk. He was a former stage magician turned supernatural debunker, with a reputation for calling out fakes, hoaxes, and small-town legends. He didn't believe in curses. He believed in stories, in human gullibility, in pattern-seeking minds desperate to make sense of death and chaos. So when he heard of Death's Doorbell, he saw it as a perfect season finale. He brought a small team, 2 cameramen, a sound technician, and a production assistant, and set up camp just beyond the tree line. They waited, just like the engineers had, with state-of-the-art audio equipment and infrared drones mapping the perimeter. The valley was quieter than death. No animals, no wind, just the bell, hanging crooked, like it had been waiting for an audience. Hours passed. Then, just before midnight, it rang. 13 slow, deliberate tolls. Reed didn't flinch. He smiled for the camera. "We're about to debunk a ghost story," he said. He walked right up to the bell, touched the rusted metal, knocked on it. "Nothing to it," he declared. That night, they filmed themselves unbolting the frame and loading the bell into the SUV's trunk. Reed laughed the whole time. The team left the valley by 2 a.m. They never made it to the highway. At 2:37 a.m., a trucker called in a crash report from Forest Hollow Road. A black SUV had swerved off the road and wrapped around an ash tree. It hadn't skidded or braked, just careened as if yanked by invisible hands. The paramedics arrived to find 3 of the team members in varying states of trauma, concussions, broken ribs, fractured wrists, but no memory of what had happened. Reed wasn't in the SUV, but the bell was, back on its post, exactly as it had been, ringing. They found Marcus Reed's body 2 days later after the search dogs refused to go into the valley. His remains were discovered not on the ground, but inside the bell. Somehow, he had been folded into it, his body crumpled like wet parchment, bones snapped and bent in ways no trauma surgeon could replicate. His eyes were open, mouth frozen mid-scream, as if he'd tried to yell before his lungs collapsed. His skin bore strange markings, bruises shaped like bells, dozens of them pressed into his flesh, as if the sound itself had hammered them in. The coroner's report was short. Cause of death? Resonance-induced organ liquefaction. His liver had melted. His heart had ruptured in perfect sync with the bell's final chime. That should have been the end of it. But stories like these don't end. In 2011, a podcast host named Darcy Hill visited the site. She was a horror enthusiast with a cult following, known for investigating places the mainstream media avoided. Her episode, "The Valley Where No One Lives," became one of her most streamed because it ends halfway through a sentence. At the 28:04 mark, Darcy says, "You can feel it in your chest, like the air's thicker here, like the valley doesn't want you to leave." Cut. Static. Followed by a faint bell sound. Not 13 rings, just one. Her backpack was later found at the valley's edge, still recording. The audio device captured the hum of wind, then what sounded like whispering. Not words, but something beneath words. One audio engineer who analyzed the file claimed the frequency of the whisper matched Sarah Jennings' final scream, 18.5 hertz. Darcy was never found. Today, the bell still stands. Locals leave offerings at the edge of the valley: dead birds, coins, old photos of loved ones. They don't talk about it anymore. They don't point tourists there, and they don't go near it even when the forest catches fire or a hiker wanders off trail. They know better, because sometimes, on windless nights, those who live closest swear they can hear it toll. Not 13 times, not even once. Just a single hum, like a throat warming up. And sometimes on those nights, someone in town dies suddenly. Chest pain, brain aneurysm, a silent scream in their sleep. When the coroner listens closely, sometimes he swears he hears a faint echo in the blood. A bell.
Researchers at the University of Virginia studied the bell again in 2019, using a remote audio probe on a drone. No one dared approach it in person. They confirmed the structure shouldn't resonate at all. The metal was cracked. The clapper was gone. It defied all acoustic logic. But the recording it made contained new screams. Voices no one had heard before. One was unmistakably Marcus Reed's, screaming, "Please, I was wrong, I was wrong." The last toll held a new anomaly, not just a scream, but a second voice, not crying, laughing. And beneath that, if you slowed the audio down far enough, there was something else. A knock. 3 slow knocks, like someone rapping from inside the bell, begging to be let out. There's a theory that the bell is a kind of trap, not for bodies, but for souls. That it doesn't just ring for the dead, but rings them in, draws their resonance, their pain, and stores it like a record player needle digging deeper with each scream. And that someday, when the bell rings its last, on the 13th hour of the 13th day of the 13th year of some cycle we haven't decoded yet, it won't just ring for one person. It'll ring for everyone, and the world will go quiet, except for one final sound, a toll that never ends.